When you're a people pleaser, you're putting other people's wants and needs before your own. Why? Seeking validation. Because it's kind of a way for you to feel needed, or a way to feel wanted, or a way to feel appreciated when you do things for other people, right? And of course, doing things for others is a great thing, but it comes to a point where if you're putting others before yourself, that's where it becomes an issue. All right, what's going on, YouTube? Thank you for joining us After Dark yet again for another episode. I appreciate y'all coming back. Listen, I hope y'all enjoyed the last one. The last episode was a pretty good episode. I enjoyed it myself. I enjoyed recording it. I enjoyed going back and watching it, and it made some pretty good clips and stuff. And there was a lot of good information in there. If you ever checked out the last episode, go ahead and check that one out, because I feel like if you're someone who's kind of in a place of confusion of what you're kind of missing out on, or what you need to continue to push forward or to start your journey, then that's a good place to start. That one and a very similar video I made called I don't even know what I called that, but I'll put the links to both of those videos in the description if y'all want to check those out. Today I'm gonna be talking about something that I've been kind of thinking about for a while, because it's something I talk about pretty often, but I never made a video about it. So today we're gonna be talking about validation. Validation, internal validation, external validation, why we seek validation, signs of chasing validation. So the reason why I wanted to make this video, or I've been thinking about this, is because I find that a lot of people tend to, or let's flip the script actually. People tell me a lot of times how I fail to explain myself, or I fail to communicate very well. And I feel the opposite. I find that people tend to over explain themselves, give too much information, or just share unnecessary things. You know what I mean? And I'll get a little bit deeper into that as we go in the video, but let's go for the definition of validation. You know, I like to go for dictionary definition. Let's go with this definition: the action of making or declaring something legally or officially acceptable. So let's take the term acceptable. It's like acceptance. You're chasing acceptance, basically. At the very base level of this definition, we're talking about acceptance. Okay. Now that word acceptance is going to become very important as we go along. So I want you to keep the word acceptance in mind, because it plays a very big part in understanding the role of validation and why people seek validation, right? So I've got a couple notes with me here today. So I said before that I was going to stop writing notes, but I found that if I write just small bullet points that I could talk about, then it helps, because I can kind of keep my mind sharp, but it also gives me the freedom to share my own opinions and share my own ideas versus just pre-writing my ideas, and I feel like I'm kind of boxed in. So we got a couple of things. So what is validation? Like I said, we're talking about basically acceptance at the base level, the basic understanding. We're talking about acceptance by others, being accepted by other people, feeling like other people are accepting of what we're providing, basically. So we'll go with that as a base definition, right? So we've got, is validation bad? Is validation a bad thing? Listen, all right. Validation isn't a bad thing. To be honest, we all want some form of validation. But what we're here to understand is the difference between wanting validation and seeking validation. There's two different things. So for somebody to want something and somebody to genuinely seek something is two different things. The seeking is a genuine commitment to something. If I say, this is what I want, and I say that I'm seeking it, that means that I am actively doing what I can to get this thing, to obtain this thing. Versus someone who wants something. People want things all the time, but that doesn't mean they're actually doing what's necessary to get it. It's kind of just a want. It's a desire, a desire deep within, versus someone who is genuinely taking the action towards something. So wanting validation and seeking validation is two different things. We all want validation. Who doesn't want to be accepted by others? The difference is the want versus the need to be accepted by others. Of course, I want to be accepted by others, but if I feel that I'm not accepted by other people, if other people find me weird, strange, different, it's me saying I'm okay with that and I'm going to keep pushing forward regardless. So validation isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of the depth in which you get into it. You don't want to be in need of validation from others. If your validation comes from an outside source, that creates a ton of problems. It creates a ton of problems in my opinion, because it's easy for your confidence to be shaken or your self-esteem to be broken when your validation comes from outside source. Real quick, let's I want to make a video about this too, but self-esteem real quick on a basic level. Self-esteem comes from, to me, values, right? Values in oneself. So if we're talking about yourself, those values is kind of how you validate yourself. If you have certain values, things that you stick to, certain principles, those are how you validate yourself. And if you are seeking external validation from others, if your self-esteem or your value is based off of how other people perceive you, then you're always going to fall short if those other opinions are put into the mix. You know what I mean? So you got to be careful with how you seek your validation. You have to be careful with seeking validation in general. Be careful with where you get your value from. You know what I mean? So you don't want to have external validation, or another term, if going back to the last video, external confidence. Confidence that is not external, that's kind of a bad way to put it, but confidence that is flawed in the sense that you only have confidence in one area, or you only feel confident if this. Like, confidence is confidence. If you're confident, you're confident, It doesn't, there's nothing that can sway you from being confident if that's what you are. So validation isn't a bad thing. I want to talk about some signs that you're seeking validation. And before I even get into this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning of the video, where people tend to over-explain themselves or other things like that. So we're going to get into that right now. This is what I mean by signs of seeking validation. So if you find yourself in any of these categories, then you might have a problem with seeking validation. And I'm not saying it's a problem as in something is wrong with you. I'm saying that it might be something worth looking into to kind of get a grasp on, or see how it may be affecting your life, if any. If you don't feel that this is affecting your life, then who am I to tell you that it needs to be changed? But if you feel that these things are personally affecting your life, your relationships, and things like that, then they might be worth looking into and possibly just getting a grasp on them. I don't want to use the word fix because it's not like it's an issue. You know what I mean? So signs of validation: over-explaining. So when it comes to over-explaining, so let's go to the opposite. Let's go to short, simple responses. And I'm not saying that I give short, simple responses for this reason. It's kind of something I've always done. It's just the way I am. It's the way I was programmed, I guess, since a young age. I've never been an over-explainer. I was always the exact opposite. I'm not a liar, but I would, if I felt like I was giving you enough information, and that was that. I didn't need to go any further unless you asked more questions. And even then, I don't, So over-explaining. When it comes to over-explaining, whenever you give a short, simple response, it is kind of like clarity. There's a clarity in it and a sureness in what you're saying. If the response is short and simple, if I'm having a conversation with someone and I ask them a question, they give me a short, simple response, then I can already kind of tell what kind of person they are. Very strict, to the point, no BS. This is the issue, let's get to it. This is your question, let's get the answer, such and such, right? When it comes to over-explaining, if you're someone who, if you were asked a simple question and you give an answer in much detail, nothing wrong with this, but it kind of shows a lack of sureness, in my opinion. And it also shows, in some cases, that it's kind of validation seeking, only because you are doing everything in your power to have this person be understanding of the information you are trying to give them, in the sense that you want little to no confusion, you want little room for questioning, you want little room for this. It's kind of like you're fearful of these potentials. Like, instead of spewing out my first answer, let me conduct an answer that answers every potential question they might have, or give them every bit of information they might need. The problem with this is, for one, it shows a lack of sureness, because it tells me that you're an overthinker, in the sense that when we talk about the word overthinking, it comes down to doing more thinking, developing in the brain, versus just actually taking action on whatever it is that you're doing. If I feel like, if somebody asks me a question, I'm going to give them the first direct answer I have. You know what I mean? And that's that. If they have any more questions after that, then cool. We can go there. I'm confident in my ability to think on my feet, keep going, whatever. If I give you an answer, then I flip it here, continue on here, go back here, bring it back here, then it's like almost like you're fearful of the response, or you're fearful that there may be a lack of understanding, or things like that. It's little details, and these things may not seem big to a lot of people as I'm explaining this, but these all do make, they're very important when it comes to certain things. Like, for example, if you plan on being like a business owner and you find yourself going to networking events to talk and meet to a bunch of people, these little things really matter. For one, nobody likes a validation seeker, someone who seeks the approval of others. It's kind of like one of those things that you kind of push away sometimes. That's for one. For two, you're talking to important people who value their time. They don't want to hear you rant for on, like, go on and on about this and that. They want short, simple, to the point. What are you here for? What can you do for me? What can I do for you? Such and such. Get to the point. Very rarely in a one-on-one networking situation will people want to know your entire life story. And even if you go into other rounds or just meeting new people, like, yes, it is very valuable to share things of yourself, but at the same time, whenever you overshare, it leaves very little to be wondered. Like, very little to be wondered, very little to be discovered. It's one of those things. It's like, imagine if you were watching a movie and at the very beginning they tell you everything that's gonna happen step by step, and then they press play. It's like, well, that just took all the excitement away from the movie. So it's kind of like, whenever you overshare with people, for one, it shows signs of unsureness in yourself, in my opinion. For two, it leaves very little to be wondered, very little to be discovered. And that can be kind of boring for a lot of people. I know for me personally, it could definitely be boring for a lot of people. You know, give people a chance to ask you questions. Give people a chance to wonder. And if we go into the realm of communication, let's talk about communication real quick. Let's go into communication. For communication, if you are broad versus if you are, just giving out every detail of your life. If you're being broad, meaning you're giving direct answers, but you're answering the questions that they have, you're giving, very selective information about what you're saying, how you're responding and things like that. When you're having a conversation with a person, certain things bring curiosity in another person. I might say something that makes the person I'm talking to say, I wonder about this, or this and that, which will lead them to asking questions. And based on the question that they're asking me, I will know what about me they find interesting. They're directly telling me what they find interesting about me just by showing where their curiosity lies. Even if it's just to hold conversation, psychologically, you would never just completely ask about something that you weren't interested in versus if the other options are on the table. So let's say I'm having a conversation with someone and I mentioned something that I did over the weekend. Or I mentioned a couple of things I did over the weekend. Like they asked me, "Oh, what did you do this weekend?" I mentioned three things. Based on which one they decide to go further, and I might find a common interest between me and this person, or know what they're interested about, and I can kind of guide the conversation in this direction. This leads to leaving more of like a lasting impact on people. It's like it's not manipulation in any form. It's just paying attention to how people respond to what you're giving them. And it's a really important thing in communication. It helps you out when it comes to networking and all different types of things. So that's something I would kind of say to look at, try out in your next conversation. Maybe just try stepping back just a little bit. And another thing that benefits is when we talk communication, people like to talk about themselves. It's the reality of things. It doesn't fully make you just self-centered, but people like to talk about themselves. And whenever you leave the ball in their court to share themselves, and you're able to listen. And when you're on the listening side of a conversation, you get to learn a lot if you're genuinely paying attention. And you can kind of see, if you look at a person, they start talking about something, it's easy to tell what lights them up. Like what topic they're excited to talk about. What topic are they excited to be asked about? And when you can find that spot and dig a little deeper there, you can create long lasting relationships. And people will see you as a person that is enjoyable to talk to, enjoyable to be around. And I just think it's a skill worth having and something that shouldn't be overlooked. So that's kind of how I feel about it. I know I went kind of every which way there, and that was just one point, but the next sign of validation seeking is wanting approval. So, wanting approval, this is kind of shown in many different shapes and forms, but sometimes it's more of a direct, genuinely asking for approval, and sometimes it's more subtly asking for approval. But the people who know what's going on. We all do it, whether we know it or not. Some people just tend to do it very frequently, and the problem with this is it can kind of get exhausting for the people around you. If you're a person who is constantly wanting approval from others, it can get exhausting because it feels like you're putting a weight or responsibility on the people around you, as if they have to continuously boost your self-esteem or boost your ego. And it's not fair for others because you should think highly of yourself. And if you don't, then that's another issue that we not an issue, but that's another thing we need to look into in the future to continue to progress. But you should find peace in yourself. You should find understanding in yourself, and you should feel comfortable with yourself. And your validation should come from yourself versus seeking external validation. But when you're begging for approval from others, like I said, it's very exhausting. It puts a pressure on them that they shouldn't have, because realistically, it's not the job of others to make you feel good about yourself. Of course, you got your friends and your family. Of course, it's good to give compliments and stuff like that. But when it becomes like a trained behavior to where I feel like if I don't compliment you or say these things, and you're gonna feel much less about yourself, then it becomes a little bit exhausting. But of course, there are exceptions. Like, there are exceptions. I'm not gonna get too deep into that in this video, but just on a broad scale, it gets exhausting to put that pressure on other people when you are constantly wanting approval from others. So just be careful with that. Um, Confirmation on decisions. Decisiveness is one of the things that I feel is make or break. If you are an indecisive person, it's going to be pretty hard to achieve anything in this world, because the kind of formula, one of the success formulas is just, you know, you have an idea, you act on it. It's just a simple decision. There's a difference, a slight difference between a decision and a choice, right? Because when you have a choice, that means this or this. You have options to pick from. When you make a decision, this is a direct one path that you are following, and you're not swaying either way. Like, This is a decision. I've decided. This is decisiveness. You're clear, and there's no questioning of what you're about to do. Versus a choice is like, I got this, and that. I'll go with this. Decisiveness is like, I'm clear on what I'm going to do. This is it, and that's what I'm chasing. Like, there's no other options. When you seek confirmation on all decisions, then, like I said, it shows unsureness. The thing about unsureness and why I keep bringing it up is when you are unsure, it's very hard for people to, how do I say this, kind of cling to you, in the sense that it's hard to trust you, kind of. If you're not even sure of yourself, it's hard. How can I be sure of you? Does that make sense? Like, I'll give a perfect example that I can think of. If there's a woman, in most cases that I've experienced, most women who have a boyfriend, fiance, husband, more times than not, the women tend to be fairly indecisive. Potentially they could be decisive on their own, but in this case of a partnership, they tend to be fairly indecisive. Now, those women lean and rely on their significant other to be that decisive one, that one that says, all right, you know what, we'll do this. This is how we'll work it out, and this is how we're gonna make it happen. And there's a reason for that. When people are decisive, they're easier to be around. They're easier to trust. You can trust them. You can like kind of put not your life in their hands, but you can kind of trust them much deeper than anybody else because they are decisive. They're clear on what they want. You can tell based on how they act, how they move, how they think, that they are one who takes action. They're decisive. Even if they're in a time of confusion, because of course we all get confused, but even in a time of confusion, we say, all right, this is what I'm deciding. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But just dwelling on something for too long, it just shows just too much unsureness. And when people are unsure, unsureness creates panic. Unsureness creates just bad stability. And these things, they don't help. They really don't. I'm sorry. It's hard to look at this camera because it's like the webcam is just like way up there. It's just an unnatural angle. But yeah, unsureness isn't something that people tend to want to be around. And just being more decisive will just help you a lot in your life in general. But yeah, confirmation on decisions, chasing compliments. We talked kind of a little bit about that, but just same deal as winning approval, just chasing compliments. Of course, compliments are gonna make you feel good, but you don't want to become someone who is reliant on compliments. Like, if you don't receive compliments, like if you put your best outfit on, you step outside and nobody says nothing about it, it shouldn't hurt your self-esteem. If you did everything you can to smell as good as you can, and you went on a date and they didn't mention it, then it shouldn't hurt your self-esteem. If you did your hair as nice as you could and you went to the grocery store and nobody said nothing about how good your hair looks, shouldn't hurt your self-esteem. You know what I mean? Like, these things, they shouldn't make or break you. Of course you might feel some type of way. That's normal, of course, but it shouldn't make or break you. That's kind of the most important piece. Is it shouldn't decide how you feel about yourself. And then people pleasing. This is one of the most important ones, and I talk about it probably the most, not on this channel, but just in my personal life. Like, when people I come across, I mention this topic very often because I feel like it's one of the biggest flaws I've ever come across in a person. Not a flaw in the sense that it makes me feel some type of way about them, but a flaw, and it's like looking from a third person perspective in your life, and I feel that you're a people pleaser. I can see all of the things that are gonna happen. Like, I know what kind of pain you're gonna feel because of this. I know how people are gonna treat you because of this. I know what kind of things you're gonna go through because of this. Like, when I see that someone is a people pleaser, I always feel some type of way because I just know that person has a lot of potential, most likely, and they may never see it through for this reason. When you're a people pleaser, you got to understand, being a people pleaser means, and I'm talking from a third person perspective because I don't feel like I've ever been a people pleaser in my life. When you're a people pleaser, you're putting other people's wants and needs before your own. Why? seeking validation, because it's kind of a way for you to feel needed, or a way to feel wanted, or a way to feel appreciated when you do things for other people, right? But and of course, doing things for others is a great thing, but it comes to a point where if you're putting others before yourself, that's where it becomes an issue. And when you're a people pleaser, you tend to do things you're not comfortable with for their sake. You tend to do things you don't enjoy for their sake. You tend to miss out on things you do enjoy for their sake. You tend to make sacrifices that you may not be happy with for their sake. You tend to stay in uncomfortable situations for their sake, stay in uncomfortable conversations for their sake. You tend to listen to people tell you a bunch of bad things about yourself because, like, I really don't know the reasoning behind some of these things, to be honest. I can't say I have the strongest understanding of the people pleaser mindset, but when I come across people who I feel they're people pleasing, I always tell them, be like, just be careful. Like, people are gonna take advantage of you, and I know it's like being nice is great, and I commend everybody who is nice. Being nice is a great thing to be, but to a certain extent, like, when you become a people pleaser to the point where it satisfies you to give other people what they need, it satisfies you to make other people feel good about themselves. Um, it's like you get validation from giving to other people, but when it becomes draining, or when it becomes like it's pulling out of you emotionally, physically, mentally, then it becomes a big issue. And I think people pleasers fail to understand this part of it and only see the benefits of being a nice person, which are beyond this world. Of course, being a nice person will get you very far in life, but you have to know your limits. Like, you have to know where to stop. There's a stopping point to where it's like, okay, this is no longer me being nice, and this is more just I'm letting people take advantage of me, basically. But that's as far as I'll go. I could probably make a whole video on the idea of people pleasing, because it's one of those things I come across way too often. And like I said, I always try to tell people, like, just be careful. Like, I like that you're a nice person. It's a great quality to have, but just be careful with who you give that to. Um, why do we seek validation? Why do we seek validation? It's I won't go too far on this one. It's simply just a needing to belong, or a need to feel wanted, a need to feel appreciated. It comes down to those few words. It's just a need to belong. I'm kind of gonna speed through these last few ones just because it's already 8 a.m. Becoming emotionally dependent on people's reactions. We talked about that a little bit, but basically it goes back to what people say or what people do shouldn't affect how you feel about yourself. You shouldn't be emotionally attached to people's reactions to the way you do things. If I like I say, I throw out, let's say we're in a group, right? This is a perfect example. If we're in a group, and let's say we're in a group project, I throw out an idea of mine for this project. I throw out an idea, and people don't like my idea. They just push it to the side, say like, no, I don't like that idea. It's a terrible idea. Now, if you emotionally react to that, then that is being emotionally dependent on people's reactions. Like, you because they didn't validate your opinions, it affects you emotionally. That's a big problem. I could go deeper in that on a part 2 if you want to, but let me know. We talked about internal versus external validation. How to stop seeking validation. This is gonna be the last segment. How to stop seeking validation. Same way I feel like how to stop doing anything that relates to this kind of skill that isn't like a physical skill. And that is first being aware. You have to be aware. You have to be aware that this is a problem that you struggle with, that you are an attention or an approval seeker, or a validation seeker. You have to be aware that you have this problem. And once you become aware, it's easier to find yourself to catch yourself in situations where you are seeking validation. And it's a simple process, simple, not easy, a simple process of awareness, understanding what's going on, understanding that you have this problem, catching yourself in the moment, and then after a few times of catching yourself, you'll find patterns, and then now it is correcting the action, slowly starting to correct the action to what you would like it to be. And like I said, it's simple, not easy. It's a long process. It'll take a while, but the important thing is that you start today if you feel that this is something that is affecting your life. But I appreciate y'all joining me for another episode. I appreciate y'all tuning in every time. Make sure you like the video, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy the content. I got plenty of videos like this that I've recorded in the past, and plenty more to come. I got a lot of big plans for this channel. We're just going to keep it going one step at a time. I appreciate y'all. I'm going to see you on the next one. Peace out.